Welcome to the BizDev podcast. I'm your host, Edwin Fisher. In today's episode, we interview Jake Washburn from the Wyatt Group. On this episode, I like it a lot. I get to interview Jake and learn how he took his real estate skills to replace his 9-to-5 job. He not only describes his strategy on real estate investing, but he also describes how he took essentially he's quit his job and ended up being in real estate full-time and also wholesaling. He goes into details of his whole story, how he bought one property, he went to Airbnb, and now he does wholesaling full-time while being a real estate professional. I find it really interesting. I think you will too. Make sure to like, subscribe, and enjoy this episode. Welcome to the BizDev podcast. I'm super excited. I have my great friend, Jake Washburn from the Wyatt Group to join us today on the podcast, talk about a lot about real estate.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me, brother. Appreciate it.
Yeah, welcome. How's it going,
Thank you.
man?
Good. How are you?
Good to see you. So let's just kind of dive in. I know you've been in real estate for a long time. Let's just see, how did that start? Where was the idea of real estate, or kind of how'd you get into this industry?
Yeah, it's really funny. I moved to Philly in 2007, and I feel like being in business school at Drexel, there was just like such a focus on entrepreneurship. They had a whole entrepreneurship school, entrepreneurship building, and that just fascinated me for some reason. And I also knew that my grandfather had done real estate and that he did pretty well with it out in Los Angeles. So I came to Drexel and just had that mind and that idea that I wanted to start my own thing, that I didn't want to work for anybody else. So, got through all the classes, did all that. Someone had gotten me into Amway in college. So I was like, trying to sell my friends, vitamins and protein bars and detergent. I was a terrible salesperson.
Okay.
I didn't sell any. The only person that bought anything from me was my mother.
Hey,
right?
Number one.
Mom's always got to buy something. So once I got out of that, I was like, all right, that didn't work too well, but the dream was still there of running my own business and
doing your own show,
doing my own thing. Yeah. So graduated and, found out my friend was buying a house pretty early on. And I was like, well, if, I don't want this to sound bad, but if he could do it, I could do it. Because I feel like I had a pretty good job. So I bought my first place in 2013, and this is back in, still coming out of the recession. I didn't get pre-approved for a whole lot. And so where I could buy was pretty limited. So we ended up in Philly in Brewery Town, which was like super up and coming, like even before it was up and coming.
In 2013?
In 2013.
Up and coming?
It was like just starting.
Okay.
Like they had just like built the condos, and it was like they had like supermarket plans and all these plans for it. But it hadn't really crossed Girard too much as of yet. So we were like, one of the first people on the street to buy a house that was fixed up. So it was a really interesting experience, really interesting time. And so in 2014, one of my coworkers was telling me how well he was doing on Airbnb.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had no idea what it was, but he was saying he was doing so well that they moved out of their house and they were renting an apartment, and Airbnb was covering like their rent and their mortgage and then some. And so I started doing some research, checking it out, looking at listings in the area. And I asked my wife if we could try it. I was like, babe, let's just try it. Let's just see what happens.
On your house, you were living.
Our primary house,
so you
our
said,
house.
Hey, I'm in this upcoming area.
Yeah.
It's kind of not the best.
Little sketch.
Little sketch in 2013, I'm sure, or 2014, Girard, that area. Yeah, it was probably. So you convinced her, let's rent out a room.
Yeah.
How'd that go?
The whole house, man. Yeah. So we put up the whole house. I think we started off. My strategy was start out a little bit low, get some reviews, and then increase the price over time. Mm-hmm. So I want to say we started around $100 a night, and this was for the whole house. It was 2-bed, 1.5 bath.
So you moved out then?
Yeah, we only on the weekends. So this was like a weekend thing, right?
Man.
Yeah. So we would leave.
Your wife's pretty accommodative.
I could not believe that she did it. the thought of people sleeping in our bed, right? That's
Yeah,
like the biggest thing. Like, hair on the floor in the bathroom and just like all these little things where you're just like, you never really think about it when you're getting, all you can see is the dollar signs when you start. And then you realize like, oh, okay, well, it wasn't exactly free to, go camping or go out for the weekend or stay somewhere else, but it was doing so well. It picked up really quick. So within a couple months, it was already paying like all of our mortgage, and that was just renting it out on the weekends.
So for two nights, it was paying your mortgage.
So like 8 nights a month, it like paid the mortgage.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
And that was just like a light bulb for me. I was like, well, what if we could get more of these? Or like, what if, we just started asking like, what if? So a couple years later, we had gotten into a small like fender bender, and the insurance company gave us cash for the car. And I said, all right, well, instead of just taking this cash and putting it into the bank, like, what if we found a property that was listed in the area, and this could be like the down payment? And lo and behold, right around the corner from us was a 2-bed, 1-bath place that was listed for like $150
in Brewertown.
Okay. Yeah. So still very up and coming in 2015. Still pretty cheap. It was a little bit of a smaller house, but it was like brand newly renovated from the ground up. It was beautiful. So, we have our agent, we put in the offer, we start countering with the owner, and we got it. And during that period, someone had reached out to me about doing a long-term Airbnb at our house for 6 months.
Okay.
And so at the time, I didn't have anything for her and her family, but then I messaged her back and I said, well, do you still want this? Like, we're moving, so you can have the whole house for 6 months straight.
All furnished.
Okay. Everything was there. Yeah, the woman was like studying abroad. She was getting her PhD through Rutgers, and she was from Slovenia of all places. So
wow,
really cool family, really nice people. Took great care of the place. So they lived there for 6 months. So that was January to June, I think, of 2016. So that took us right into like prime tourist season for Philadelphia, which is like the summertime. So then we started jacking up the price for the summer, and I think we made $20,000 that year on Airbnb. And that was probably, if it was like just a normal rental, probably would have been like $12,000, $13,000.
Okay.
So a pretty good, like 40% more than what we would have made on a traditional rental.
Just from using Airbnb. And
it was exploding at the time. The platform was just exploding around that time. It was amazing.
Was that when the Pope came around?
The Pope was, I think, 2016.
Okay. Did you get crazy? Were you still in the Airbnb?
We got $400 a night for the Pope.
Wow.
For like 4 nights. It was amazing. It's like, let's take a trip.
Yeah, no, I heard like a lot of people during the Pope when he came to Philly. He was only going to come to Philly and not New York. So like I heard like even places out in Jersey were getting like $2,000-3,000. It was like crazy.
It was a huge draw for the city. That was like a big, got people there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then so you got your 2 live-in Airbnb. So then I guess you're working full-time.
Yeah, working full-time.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what were you doing?
Yeah, so I was a data analyst. So I had an internship at school, and that kind of just naturally converted over into a full-time job in 2011. So graduated 2011, was working there full-time, and just got really good at data analysis and Excel spreadsheets. And so that's going to come into play, I feel like, a little bit later when we talk about like finding deals and getting data. But just want to drop that seed right now just because I feel like it's going to come up.
That skill set was you were paid to develop it.
Yeah.
In some sense.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That's my advantage.
So then, you're working and you kind of seems like this light bulb effect. Like, man, okay, I can really see there's some positives of this real estate thing. And it's, maybe a few years ago, people were saying it was a terrible investment, but things were kind of seeing the other side, and the market was kind of there's tons of opportunities back then too, compared to where we're at now, the end of 2021. So what was some of your next thoughts and thinking to move from there?
So the Airbnb was great. We eventually moved back into the first house and kind of swapped things over, did Airbnb at the second house. That block was a little bit rougher, just having more like boarded up houses and vacant land and stuff. And so people didn't like that vibe as much. And so we're kind of like, well, we're getting a lot of like pushback from people like not wanting to stay here. And also it's just a lot of work between linens, towels,
and were you doing that yourself?
Mopping. We were both doing it ourselves.
Ooh, putting in the grind.
Yeah, we're both full-time working professionals, and like, you know, my wife's in school doing grad school on top of that, and we're trying to keep up with these Airbnbs. And, you know, my thought was always to provide like very clean, very hospitable amenities and touches for people to enjoy their stay so that, you know, they would stay again. And that was just something like I learned really early on in my working career, having worked in a grocery store, that like customer service is number one, no matter what. And I've taken that into where I am now. And so we got tired of Airbnb. So we started doing more traditional rentals to tenants. So 12-month leases, and we did pretty well with that property. I thought things had kind of topped out in terms of price in 2019. And then
you and probably many others.
We all thought 2019 was like the height of the market. And in some ways it was. But, you know, so we sold that place. And, you know, just before that, we had took a home equity line of credit on our house. I had found a property that didn't need a whole lot of work in Breetown, a couple blocks north. And I convinced my wife that we should buy it and get a hard money loan and like fix it up and rent it out. And I had no idea what I was doing, but I had heard about this BRRRR method, right? Buy, rehab, refinance, repeat.
Yeah.
So the whole like, you know, method there was to do just that. And so we got pretty lucky with that property. It didn't need a ton of work. We hired a good general contractor. He was a little bit slow on getting the work done, but he did a good job. And looking back, it's one of the lowest maintenance properties that I have to this day. We still have that, the first ever, you know, Washburn Wyatt Group property.
So how was it finding, so you said this was like completely new to you. Like how was it to find a contractor, like, you know, in the Philly area? You know, you hear all the time, like, this contractor screwed me over. Like, what was your process of getting a contractor?
Yeah, so in just being on the Bigger Pockets forums and trying to learn from some of the people that I had met through that, the biggest thing was personal referrals. And so there was a guy at my church that was a contractor, and he was a little bit too busy to do it himself, but he recommended this other guy that, you know, he came recommended. So I knew at least I could trust that recommendation, because I think when a contractor recommends someone else that they really know and they know is going to do good work, and they have a high ethical standard that, you know, they're at least going to do the work. Maybe they're not the fastest, maybe they're not the cheapest, but they're going to do the best work, and it's going to be a quality product at the end of the day. And I think, you know, looking back, it was a great decision. I mean, the guy did a great job. He did everything well. He saved me some money on certain things. And so that recommendation really made the property successful, because we were able to pull pretty much all of our money back out on the first try, which is hard, you know. And I feel like even back then, I overpaid a little bit for the property, but the area is appreciating so quickly that the property values just went up like exponentially within the year or so that it was being renovated.
And pulling out your money, meaning like how do you go about that? Yeah,
so I want to say we bought it for about $92,000. And I think we put about 60 into it. Okay. So let's just say like, you know, 155. And, you know, I want to say it appraised for like 190. And so that's roughly about, you know, 75, 80% of 190. And so basically getting the permanent financing allowed us to basically pull out the 92,000 that we paid for it, as well as all of the construction that we put into it. So that's the goal. And I think that's what, you know, if you're going to do the BRRRR method, you really want to go in pretty conservatively. Know for sure that when that property is ready for appraisal, that you're going to be able to pull all your money back out just by having those comps in your hand in the beginning.
Cool. So then you rehabbed that property. What were some of the next steps from there? So
from there, once that property was stabilized, I want to say it was 2017, I started looking for the next one, and I found one a couple blocks from the Airbnb that we used to have. And so we had taken some of that money and also, you know, borrowed from friends and family to basically buy that property, renovate it, and then, you know, do the same thing. I didn't do as well on that one in that I did leave a little bit of money into that deal. So, the example being, I want to say that one was about 110. Put about 50 into it, but then it only appraised for maybe, 200 or so. And we ended up probably leaving about 10,000 into the deal, which now, a couple of years later, things having appreciated, we have been able to refinance it again, get some better rates. Yeah, twice now. Now, I will say the past couple of years has been amazing for refinances just because the rates are so low.
So as it kept appreciating, rates kept lowering down for you, and you just were able just to pull money from there.
Yeah, so most lenders, not all the time, but sometimes they will have a prepayment penalty depending on the type of lender.
Yeah.
So even though the lender on the second property had a prepayment penalty, we went from, I want to say, like a 6% interest to 4.5%.
Wow.
Yeah. So that...
And 30-year fixed?
Yeah. We got a true 30-year fixed on, a commercial. They call it commercial because it's held in an LLC.
Okay.
So even with that, like those two, we put the first two properties on a blanket loan. Blanket loan is just whenever you're putting more than one property onto a loan. So we did that. We pulled about $75K in equity out, and that was, I want to say, 4 or 5 months ago at this point. And so that's tax-free. So when you talk about not wanting to pay taxes, wanting to, not overpay to the government, you definitely want long-term, you want to have some rentals, just if nothing else, just to help you balance out some of your taxes and have those write-offs and have that tax-free refinance interest. Where you're able to pull that money back out. Yeah.
And I just want to mention to the audience, because it can be a bit confusing, like, how's that, like, what's tax-free? So the reason it's tax-free is because Jake is actually putting debt on the property. So that $70,000, that's not income to the IRS view of it. That's actually a loan. So he gets $70,000 because his property appreciated. But that $70,000, eventually, 30 years from now, you will pay that back. And another benefit of that $70,000 30 years from now is going to be, worth so much less because of inflation. So, like, there's so many amazing features of real estate that offers that not only, like, okay, you got a good deal, great, which, I mean, kind of a lot of it had to do with timing and, like, patience. So your timing was perfect, holding it, and then, not selling it because it might go down. No, cash flow, and all these other benefits came with it, which is really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And the beautiful thing about keeping some of the properties is if you have a year when you're looking at a really big tax bill, you can ask your accountant to accelerate some of that depreciation to offset that particular year. So, for example, we sold the we sold the first investment property we ever bought that was an Airbnb. So we made $85,000 gross, and then, the ideal would have been to do like a 1031 exchange or to buy another property just to offset some of that capital gains. And so there's a lot of different ways you can time it, a lot of different structures you can use to avoid some of those taxes. A lot of people don't know this. You can buy income and producing properties in an IRA. So doesn't matter how old you are, you just get your IRA. You can buy within that IRA, you do a self-directed IRA. So we can go in so many different directions with this. And that's what I love about real estate is there's hundreds of different niches that you can be within real estate, and you can become an expert in that niche and do really well with it. As long as you put the time, the effort, the discipline, you can get good at it. Anybody can get good at it.
And the funny thing is, I had one investor I was just talking to, and he said real estate, or actually no, I guess, I don't know. I call it, I remember mentioning it to him, it's the get rich slow. Like that's, a lot of things, especially now. I've interviewed previous guests, Chef Dizzy. He was in the market of the NFTs, and he knows all about it. And it was awesome. It was a great interview. But like to me, like that industry I'm still learning about it. But it seems like very quick, transactional, like which is good. People are making money there too. But I think with real estate, it's a different mindset, like thinking, like, well, it depends. It could be transactional, but for an investor standpoint, it's like the long-term buy and hold, let it appreciate, but you can depreciate, take losses, and like to me, yeah, I
our tax code favors people that buy property, whether you're a homeowner. You can deduct your mortgage interest. You can deduct other aspects. If you have a business and you work out of your house, you can deduct part of your home office. If you're a landlord, every property you have has a 27.5-year depreciation schedule. So you take whatever value of the property that you have and you divide it by 27.5, and that's your per year deduction. So most investors that have rentals pay little to no taxes on their rentals because of that. After the 27.5 years, you've got to figure something else out, because then it loses part of the tax benefits. But most of us, that's a problem that's usually pretty far off.
Yeah, and if you think about it too, that property 27.5 years later will more than likely be almost paid off. So then you have something that's, pretty much printing cash every month, and it's paid off. And yeah, you don't have to sell me, but it's and I also too, like, if you're a W-2, or hired by an employer, like you can use real estate as your secondary business and to be able to take write-offs. So you might be able to write off your car as a business expense, or you might be able to write off your apartment rent because that's an second office. So there's a lot of things. You definitely want to talk to your CPA. We're not financial advisors, but that's like the beauty of it. So continuing your story of how you sounds like you're getting more advanced and getting deeper into it. Yeah. What was like the next chapter of it?
So fixing and renting the second property was a bit of a struggle. We had some issues with the contractors, as happens to many investors at some point in time. And so it ended up taking longer than expected for me to pay my mom back on some of the money that she lent.
So wait. So
I'm
your
sorry, Mom.
Amway?
Yeah.
Okay. Dude, that's awesome. She got Amway and a private lender. Was that the one? Was that the hard money you said?
Yeah, I gave her.
What was the interest rate?
20%, 10 or 20% return. I mean, in the end, it took longer to pay back, but where else are you going to get that kind of return?
She was a winner.
She ultimately, she didn't need the $25,000 was nothing for her. It was everything to me, just to get this property going. And so, what I realized when I looked back on the settlement sheet for that property, I had paid a wholesaler $33,000 assignment fee for that property. And I said,
and how much was the property?
I bought it for $110,000.
Whoa, okay, yeah.
So let's talk about that for a second. I looked back on that and I said, wait a second, am I in the wrong niche here? Like, this wholesaler just made $33,000 on one deal. Some people don't even make that on flips anymore. Yeah. And so I was getting, I had heard about wholesaling and I had heard about people on Bigger Pockets doing it. I didn't have a great framework for how it worked exactly. And so really at the end of that year, 2017 or so, I started looking into it and doing research. 2018 starts, 29 years old. And I've heard that it said when you're 29, 39, or 49, you have this big milestone ahead of you, whether it's 30, 40, 50 years old, and you want to do something just out of the box, crazy, out of the ordinary, just because you see that milestone coming. And I kind of felt that was the case. And so I bought this training course for $500 in January of 2018. It was by Sean Terry. And it was, quit your job in, 19 weeks or less or something like that. And so I was like, well, that's great. Yeah, of course I want to quit my job. I don't want to be a data analyst anymore. Mm-hmm. And so I went through the course. It was about, 4 weeks of material. Gave you the scripts, showed you how to do marketing, showed you how to build a website, showed you how to cold call and text and direct mail and talk to sellers, talk to buyers, build a buyer's list. It was sort of like a small business in a box type of program. And so that was great. I started doing that, sent some mailers, really didn't have any success at first. Found another coaching program, and that one was a little bit more expensive, but you could tell it was a lot more comprehensive. And so that one was probably more like a 2-month course, right? Really intense, weekly coaching calls, all that. Wow. And so, I knew I wanted to do a wholesaling because I knew that if I could build some of the capital while finding the good deals, I could sort of create a business that would sustain itself and also provide me as the one who wants to have the rentals with a steady stream of good deals for me if I wanted them. And so having that mindset, I just really got into it in 2018. In the fall, started seeing some deals come through. It really wasn't until 2019, and I'll never forget it, in April of 2019, closing a wholesale deal with $20,000 assignment fee.
Nice. That must felt good.
It felt really great. And, at the time, I had spent all this money on marketing, and I was still just learning and trying to be confident and work with these sellers and going through the meat grinder with some of these deals and some of these sellers being on drugs and just crazy situations and properties. And it's really funny because my first 2 or 3 deals were all in Kensington.
And describe to your listeners what Kensington is.
And if you've never been to Kensington in Philadelphia, it has the largest open air drug market on the East Coast. And so it's a really tough area, but there's investors there that are willing to buy really cheap houses. I sold that one house. I think I had it under contract for like $12,000. I sold it for, $14,000, $15,000. And that $3,000 was a lot of money for me at the time. And, luckily I was working and I was able to put some of that disposable income in marketing. But man, that first deal probably took about 4 or 5 months because we had to open an estate. I had no idea how to open an estate. I'm like, wait, can I even, how am I even doing this? This only lawyer should be able to do this. But I learned the hard way. That's why I say went through the meat grinder on the 10, 20 trips to City Hall just to figure out what forms to use and who needs to sign this and who needs to sign that. And I had gotten the seller in touch with her sister, who she had not talked to, by the way, in 30 years in order to facilitate that deal. And so I just learned so much by just being in the weeds, learning about title, learning about encumbrances and title issues and how to get a deal closed. And I just didn't give up. I refused to let that deal go. I paid money for that lead. I paid money for that. I am not going to let it go. And that, stubbornness and tenacity is what stuck with me these 3 years.
So it took you about 5 months from idea to first or successful closing, $20,000 type. Took you 5 months?
At least, I want to say, at least 6-8 months of 3 small deals, right? Probably around $1,000 to $3,000 each.
Of the profit.
Okay. And then they slowly started getting a little bit bigger. But the house that had the $20,000 assignment fee, nobody should have been living in this house. There was dog poop on the floor. They had no heating. This is the middle of winter. They have space heaters. They're huddled up on the couch. It's just the bathrooms were almost unusable. And so I just remember sitting down with that seller and them really just needing the money to move. They wanted to move to Jersey. They said, we're tired of this house. We're tired of, there's no parking here. It's just miserable. And I said, well, what do you think it's worth? And, he gave me a number and I said, I think it's probably closer to 40. And, we kind of went back and forth a little bit. So I'd gotten it under contract for $50,000. I sold it for $70,000. And it was a lot. It was intense. We had a lot of people coming to the house that were interested in it because it was such a good price. And, I hadn't set expectations with the seller up front that, hey, there's going to be a lot of people walking through your house.
Oh, okay.
And, to him, he didn't know, who are these people?
Yeah.
And so, wholesaling can get a bad rap because of that, because you're literally bringing the end buyer into somebody's house while they're there. And so you really have to, set expectations with the seller, like, hey, these are my investors, partners. These are people that I'm working with to facilitate the sale of your property. We're making this super easy for you by having no contingencies. It's as is. We're paying the closing costs. There's a lot of benefits. That house, look, if that was listed on the market, nobody may have wanted to even go in there between the dog smells and the situation there. And it was just a really bad situation. So there's a certain type of property that it makes sense for, but statistically, only 6 to 10% of all properties in any given market are considered distressed and end up being cash sales. And so that's what really wholesalers are going after.
That's 6%, you said?
6 to 10%
Wow.
of all properties are off-market wholesale deals typically.
And those are the ones you're scout.
That's what we're going
Yeah.
after. Yeah. I mean, look, an agent commission on a $70,000, $80,000 sale, you're looking at maybe $1,500, $1,700, versus $20,000 spread. And look, it was enough money for them to move and find a place that worked for them.
They got it quick.
It went quick, and it was good for the investor. They bought it for $70,000. I want to say they sold it for $225,000.
Did they
put a lot of work into it, of course. They had to gut the whole place.
Wow.
But yeah, that's my philosophy, is to make a win-win for everybody. And, we want to make the sellers happy, because at the end of the day, that seller is someone who needs help, and you want to be able to work with them in such a way that they recommend you in the future. And that comes back to the customer service aspect of things. Treat this person well, with respect, don't take advantage, do what's best for them. And, I had to learn that there's nothing wrong with making money. Like, at first I was like, well, am I really doing the best thing for this person? Like, wouldn't the best thing have been to get them more money for the property? And so you really just have to think through, like, what really is the best thing for this person, and what do they want out of it? Some people are willing to trade some money for the speed, the ease, and the convenience of being able to get out of that situation quickly.
One and done.
Yeah.
Instead of dealing with, you might not even be able to get a real estate broker to list that property. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm not even going to touch that. I'm going to make $1,500 and all my clients are going to see this property. So there is value there. It might not be like totally visible right in the moment, but I can definitely see it. So you hit that $20,000 check. They're like, wow, proof of concept, this works. So then how long was that before, you said you were still at work. So what was that time frame between that killer deal to, doing it full time?
So 2019, we were all still in the office. We were all working, full time as normal. And so, I would take phone calls out in the stairwell or in the lobby.
Oh boy.
I would sneak into other offices. I mean, I did what I had to do. I had to take phone calls. There's really no way around getting a deal under contract without speaking to somebody. You've got to, even if you're sending mailers and stuff, you've still got to talk to that person, as desperate as they are. And so some things just can't wait. And I felt bad, like stepping away from my desk, taking phone calls, doing that. But at the same time, I knew where I was going. I knew what I wanted, and I had to go after it. And so the best thing that happened for my business, maybe similar to yours, was COVID-19. March of 2020, we all went home. So I went from working in an office of like 300 people now to working from home, to having that flexibility. I wasn't being micromanaged. I could go on an appointment for 2 hours and come back and make up the difference if I wanted to. And in 2020 is really when we hit that stride of 6 figures in the business. And so that was a game changer for me. And, all the while, between 2017 and 2020, we're slowly buying rental properties, right? It wasn't just wholesaling. I mean, I really focused on wholesaling, but I also always wanted to keep in the back of my mind that I'm doing this to get more rental properties and passive income and long-term investment.
Not thinking about I just made $35 grand. I'm gonna go buy a BMW. I mean, you could.
It was hard not to, do some of those things at the time. I really, was like, could use this, could use that. But it's like I really had to stay focused and pull back and say, look, like, just delay that gratification a little bit longer. Like, it's coming, just delay it a little bit longer.
Hence, back to what I said, get rich slow. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be cool to have a BMW, but I mean, or you can get something that tax benefits, appreciates, leverage debt. Yeah, it's hard to do. It really, especially too, like, I'm sure you question yourself, like, dude, is this even working? Like, month 3, it's like, I mean, it takes some tenacity to push through that. Oh my goodness, like, I don't know. I did this course, I did that, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like kind of like that takes some cojones to to really. So then you eventually go full time, and then now that's where we're at now, up to present day, full time wholesaler, full time real estate investor, just taking advantage of the flexibility, right? Pros and cons. You know, you're your only person to report to, so that's really good sometimes, and sometimes it sucks, I'm sure.
It's interesting having a job and having a business. The job, I hated it, right? So it constantly motivated me to get more deals, to, stack more money away as savings for salary. But then once I quit, October 2021 now, it was that, like, okay, like, I wasn't doing anything brand new, but now having to come up with a schedule was tough. And there's a lot of other factors involved too, just like, discipline and scheduling and when to do certain tasks and time blocking. And there's all these things that I'm still learning as I go along. But, I think by and large, having more time has allowed me to take advantage of other marketing channels that I didn't have before, like Text Blast, which is a more time-intensive marketing channel. So before, what got me to that point was a cold caller. I had a great caller in the Philippines. She got a lot of business for us and helped us do really well. But just looking at my monthly budget and then having to realize I had to pay myself from my business, which I had never done before, right? I had to put myself on payroll.
Yeah.
That was a big step for me. And then realizing that, okay, well, maybe instead of a cold caller, I could do just as well with texting and other, marketing channels. Yeah, it's going to take me more time, but I'll have that, financial freedom in the sense that I don't have to worry about, paying myself. And so you just, as you go in any business, you want to tweak and evolve and learn from what's working and what's not working, and, focusing on your strengths. Like, over the past 3 years, I built up a really good buyers list. I mean, there's over 7,000 investors on my list.
Wow.
And so, something to supplement some of my deals is to help other wholesalers sell their deals. And that's what I'll do in between some of my deals closing.
You can leverage your list.
Exactly. Leverage the list. That's a strength, Coming from a data analyst background, I don't really pay a whole lot for lists. I have ways to pull those lists from the city and from the county, different websites. And so
list for the buyers or list for the investors?
List for sellers. So
okay, gotcha.
Basically, I'll make up lists. I mean, I'll make up lists that nobody else has because that's just how I think.
Mm-hmm.
So take, for example, like you can download like all of the property data in Philly. There's like 580,000 properties. So you can see
580,000?
Yeah, in the whole city. So
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
It's smaller than other cities because we're very dense.
Mm-hmm.
And we have the densest downtown in the country in Philadelphia. So,
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, Center City, Philly is the densest, like, residential downtown. A lot of other cities are more like office focused, and that might be changing, but at least Philly's like that now. And so anyway, part of my advantage is I'm just able to download that Excel file. I mean, it's huge, but coming from that data analyst background, I take that, I slice it and dice it I work a little magic with it.
Pivot tables.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pivot tables. I learned Tableau from the job I just quit.
Mm-hmm.
So, I bought it for myself, and I was like, this is such a powerful tool because it lets me focus on, like, if I just want to look at multifamily zone properties in this zip code that transferred for this price, like, there I have a list right there. If a property sold for $1, like, it usually signifies it was transferred between family, or it was an inheritance or an estate or something like that. And that typically signifies some level of motivation because that person owns a property outright. When someone owns a property outright, they may be a little bit more willing to sell at a discount if they can do it quickly and, just get on with their life.
Wow. I didn't know that. That's very interesting. You took your, the data side of things, and yeah, I mean, a lot of people, my guess is they buy lists. So, I mean, you're already kind of making your own from scratch.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool. I mean, taking the city data, which, I'm sure it's probably hard to sift through. I'm sure they don't make it the easiest for the individual user. But so what do you see yourself like? So we're end of 2021. Gosh, we got 2022 coming up. Like, where do you see yourself 5 years? Like, what's the goal?
Yeah, I mean, between doing some flips and wholesaling, really using that to build up capital to continue getting rentals, but not just single family. I mean, single families are great, and they typically do get a little bit more in rent when you think about it. Like, someone renting an entire house is willing to pay a little bit more because they have a backyard.
Mm-hmm.
They have the whole house, they have the basement, there's more space and amenities for them. But as you increase the unit count and what you're looking at, if you're looking at multifamily, there's a different approach. I think once you hit a 5-unit building, is that the bank stops looking at comparable sales of similar properties. They start looking at what is that income producing from that property, and then they'll appraise it at what the value is in terms of the income approach. And so that's where we're kind of headed. Just thinking through, meeting up with other investors, talking to them about what's working and what makes sense and what maximizes the value of real estate is really that multifamily. So we've got a couple duplexes we're working towards right now. One has a squatter, and that's a whole process. In Philadelphia. Philly is very squatter friendly, and that's okay because we're going to get through it. And another duplex that we're working on, just helping the family through the estate process. But, if we're able to get that at a fairly decent price, it should appraise for maybe, $500,000 and have not only enough to allow us to pull our money back out, but then to have a really nice, duplex for people in the neighborhood. Duplexes, multifamily, tend to be a little bit more affordable on a per unit basis. So, when we think about Philadelphia and big cities, population is growing. People are coming in from other cities. We need density, and that's really what multifamily provides. And there's a lot of benefits for multifamily too, just in terms of larger buildings being able to offset some of their carbon footprints with green roofs and solar panels. And there's a lot of cool stuff happening in Philadelphia, energy neutral buildings and stuff like that. And so I think as you have bigger buildings, you can do a lot of cool and innovative things that you can't necessarily do with a single family home. And I just read that Philly is actually leading the way in converting buildings from other uses to residential. So we're talking about old factories, churches, industrial, just huge buildings that have been like derelict for years are now being converted. And it's so cool to see. They have huge windows. They have these really awesome concrete floors. I mean, just stuff that you can't afford to build the same way today.
Especially in brewer towns like the ones, there's a lot of conversions.
Yeah.
To see.
Brewerytown was named after the breweries that were there prior to, Prohibition. It was like 10 huge breweries that were, producing all the beer for the city, like pretty cool.
That's crazy.
And you got, close to the river, a lot of industrial because that's what they were producing. They were shipping things down the river. And so, there's a lot of industrial still left over from that time period.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, Jake, I mean, This is awesome. You coming down, kind of telling your story, kind of letting the audience know like the benefits of real estate, tax benefits, financing. I learned a lot. Learned about your story, especially like data analytics.
Yeah.
But dude, I'm wishing you the best of luck and success for the Wyatt Group and yourself for 2022. But yeah, thanks for coming on, brother.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed the episode. Just some final thoughts. While interviewing Jake, I learned a good bit. I learned Jake has a lot of patience. It's something that I guess in, I don't know, today's generation or my generation, the millennials, we're just fine. I mean, we don't always have it, which makes sense. I mean, that's kind of what we, everything's quick, fast. But his view on real estate was kind of thinking the long-term play, delayed gratification. Also, it was pretty cool. One thing that I took, as he's in the Philadelphia market, he's able to essentially extract his own data from the public information that the city of Philadelphia provides. And with his job skills, his original, 9-to-5 job, he was a data analytics. He's able to, I guess, create pivot tables in Excel and really hone in on potential leads in the wholesale Philadelphia market to essentially get an edge on his competitors. So, yeah, it was a great episode. I really enjoyed talking to Jake, but I hope you guys did too. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment. Let me know what you think of that about the episode. Thanks so much.